Hey guys, welcome back to the show today. We're talking about liability insurance coverage for fitness, wellness, and prevention under the PTA scope of practice. And this is number 4 in a 5-part series that I've put together to train PTAs on how they can look into things to make sure that they are covered and mitigating their risk when they're stepping outside and utilizing their PTA skills, but maybe under a different certification or even as a stretch mobility coach. So today's topic is going to be about liability insurance coverage in fitness, wellness, and prevention while following your PTA scope of practice. In most cases, guys, PTA, professional liability insurance, covers a PTA while they are performing physical therapy services under the supervision of a physical therapist. Now, a PTA that is working outside PT services, typical professional liability policies simply state that the policy covers professional liability for the PTA. Now, this can be interpreted as covering the PTA when and only when the PTA is performing professional duties within a PTA's scope of practice. Now, if a PTA offers a fitness class, you're going to need to determine whether these services are covered physical therapy services. And sometimes our licensing boards don't specifically address fitness, wellness, and prevention in the statutory language of the PTA Practice Acts. But the rules and the regulations also do not address this language either. So we kind of categorize this as kind of a gray area. And guys, don't make the mistake in doing that because you're putting yourself at risk and performing these treatments. So a PTA that is working outside traditional PT will need to address their licensing board to see whether their scope of practice, what it is in situations of fitness, wellness, prevention, and health. Most of us check out our laws and regulations and they see that there are specific gray areas, but be aware that your policy coverage under your liability policy as a PTA depends on your state laws. And that same malpractice insurance policy could provide different coverage based on the state that you live in and you reside in. Therefore, if state laws, rules, and your board advice still does not answer the question required to ensure coverage, you're going to need to have a discussion with the malpractice company or an agent to explain the new services that you're going to be providing and explain that they will be centered around fitness, prevention, and wellness services. But and this is a big but, guys, you need to tell them that you are a PTA and you want to make sure that you're going to be covered. And when this policy is being used, and you want to make sure, because you have a higher license, you want to make sure that they look up the state practice acts with you to make sure that that policy does cover you for your new service offerings. Now, some state practice acts will limit physical therapy to the care of individuals whose ability to function is impaired or threatened by a disease or injury, where other state boards may allow prevention in their language. And guys, I have no way of knowing what all of the state practice acts are. So most of these practice acts don't define whether leading fitness classes or wellness services are within the scope of a physical therapy practice. Each board is going to interpret a PTA scope of practice as not to include wellness, fitness, or prevention to be in the practice of physical therapy. But guys, you hold a license and may not be able to promote or call yourself a PTA while you're rendering a different service, but it may be interpreted by your customer or your client that those services are being provided because you are a PTA. And it may be mistaken for PT services. So if your state board says you shall not represent that you're a PTA in carrying out these new services, then you need to really talk with your board and define what that is. Number one, see if your board even mentions any language about fitness, wellness, prevention in it, but make sure that you don't represent yourself as a PTA and that you're not carrying out PT type services or providing a therapeutic service other than the general functions and goals that are inherent to wellness, fitness, or prevention. To make sure that you see that the state board doesn't say you can't provide these services, that some of these states merely say that these programs are not considered to be physical therapy services, and some state boards will add without or absent a requirement to have some other license or certification. PTAs can provide fitness, wellness, and prevention services as long as they don't mislead that client and that they state to consumers that they are performing fitness, wellness, and prevention services. Okay. So this is where it gets really sticky. The board's advice typically means that fitness, wellness, and prevention are not under the board's jurisdiction and that the PTA does not have to worry about complying with the board in this area. However, guys, and this is a big however, it also means that a PTA professional malpractice policy that is purchased as coverage to cover negligent acts must be with the provision of PT, and it will not cover a PTA while leading fitness, wellness, or prevention classes or services. Guys, what this means is it results in the PTA checking to see if additional coverage is going to be needed to cover negligent acts that could happen when instructing fitness, wellness, and prevention type services. Now, if you're a PTA and you're considering offering these new services, I want you to talk to your malpractice agent or your company to determine whether that your new services will require extra coverage or an extra policy. Make sure that they document any conversations and make sure you document it as well. And document those conversations with your carrier. And guys, obtain a letter from your carrier outlining this coverage. When in doubt, pay for extra coverage for fitness, wellness, and prevention. Now, scope of practice for personal training, and I'm going to center on this because this has kind of been a big area where I'm noticing the PTAs that I'm talking to actually are stepping out and getting a certification in personal training. So information will fit if you're going for a different certification, just kind of understand the scope of that certification. So personal training liability insurance usually covers services directly related to personal training. And this is going to be things like exercise programming, fitness assessment, and coaching. Now, if the PTA's fitness class exceeds the scope of a typical personal training service, now this may be, you can get into all kinds of things when we have a skill, right? This could be a balance class. This could be a senior fitness class that focuses on fall prevention. These are areas that are needed, okay? They're totally areas that are needed, but that kind of exceeds the scope of a typical personal training service. The insurance might not provide coverage if something goes awry in that class. Now, let's talk about your professional designation. Insurance coverage often depends on the professional designation under which services are offered. So if a PTA was conducting the fitness class under the title of a PTA and not explicitly as a personal trainer, the situation would be seen as overlapping professional responsibilities, okay? Now let's talk about policy terms. The terms and conditions of personal training liability insurance policies would define the scope of coverage within personal training. And it's important to thoroughly review the policy to understand what scenarios are covered and under what circumstances you are not covered. Make sure if you're not covered that you have a different policy, a rider, or you actually have written confirmation that your PTA insurance policy will cover those so that you have an umbrella of coverage. Now, guys, documentation, adequate documentation of the class. This is going to be including a consent form, participation information. You guys, you're going to have to take history. You're going to have all of this stuff on file, and all of the details of the class structure could be critical in determining coverage eligibility. So make sure that you are maintaining adequate documentation. Now, you're also going to have to take into account your dual role and consider that if you are a PTA and you are offering personal training services in addition to your clinical role, there could be questions about whether the situation falls under a personal training insurance policy, or it needs to come and coverage is covered over their broader professional liability insurance as a PTA. Now, these are just things, guys, that will help you make sure that you have enough insurance coverage so that you can mitigate your risk when you're stepping out and working as a solo provider. Now, given the potential complexities involved, it's recommended that a PTA consult with their liability insurance provider directly. You need to discuss your situation, and you need to provide specific details about the certifications that you have, the roles that you're going to be playing, and the nature of the fitness class. And you need to inquire about the extent of coverage in all of these situations. This direct conversation with the insurance provider will help you, a PTA, understand whether the adverse effects would be covered under your personal training liability insurance, or if additional coverage is needed. And guys, get it in writing. If they say they're going to cover it, know that these are salesmen and they are trying to sell a policy. They're not worried if you're covered or not. Your job is to make sure you're covered. Ultimately, every insurance policy is different, and the specifics of each of the situations will play a significant role in determining your coverage eligibility. And guys, it's important for you, a PTA, to have a clear understanding of your insurance coverage. And you need to communicate with your insurance provider to ensure that they are adequately protecting you when you're offering alternative services. And if you don't have a certification and it is required by your state licensing board, consider your liability when moving forward and utilizing your experience when you're not aligning with your state practice acts. Now, if you are in a PTA that wants to work outside your PTA clinical job and you aspire to become a solo practice owner, I actually offer PTAs a solo practitioner new business accelerator program, and it's going to provide you with everything that you need so that you can focus on what you love, and that is treatment. If you want to learn more, join me for a free information session, and I'll put the link below the show today. Guys, go out, call your state board, ask these questions, call a liability insurer, and make sure you understand your liability. Before you jump out, you're going to have to really define your services and make sure that you have all of that in front of you before you talk to your insurance agent to make sure that you're covered. Hope this helps, guys. Again, this is series 4 of 5. And on our next show next week, I'm going to be talking a little bit deeper about PTA liability risk, malpractice, and insurance for PTAs looking to work outside their professional license. And I want you to really understand all of this stuff so that you can mitigate your risk. So guys, looking forward to you getting to that number 5 series of training. And I hope this information has been helpful for you. Thanks so much for joining me today.